Welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's your host for this week, David Pruitt.
Well, hello and welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time listening to us, we want to welcome you over and invite you over to our website, www.studentministryconversations.org, where you can find all of our previous episodes, show notes, blog articles, and much, much more. Our goal here is that you are inspired, encouraged, and that the things that you hear on this podcast would equip you to be a better student pastor for the church that you are serving in. All right, let's get into it. Today, we're having an awesome in-house episode. Every once in a while, Brent and I like to get together, and sometimes that's more than just Brent and I, but it seems like a lot of our in-house within the last year or so have been Brent and I getting together. But sometimes we get an idea, and it's just fun to be able to get together and talk about it. So today, you guys know Brent, but we'll start this way, since we all know Brent really, really well. Tell us, tell us maybe a fun thing that happened this summer, and maybe a not so fun thing that happened this summer. Catch us up, buddy.
Oh man. Yeah. So as far as that, I'll do a fun thing ministry wise and a fun thing family wise. Family wise, we got to do quite a few vacations this summer, just to different places. Got to spend a lot of time, quality is stuff like that. But the cool thing about this summer that I really, really enjoyed was me and David both direct the middle school camp in our area. And so while we were out there, my oldest son was going into 6th grade. And then my youngest son and my wife were out there too, and they just got to spend the week with me. So I literally got to spend the week of camp with my entire family, and that was really, really cool. As far as like a ministry context, though, there's so many from this summer. I would have to say. Yeah, so one of the cool things that happened this summer was the fact that we just had a ton of different opportunities for kids to step up, and it was in so many different ways over the summer. From some of our praise team coming out and leading worship for the mid-high camp that me and David direct, to other students just wanting to step up and take ownership of different parts. We have two kids that are going to be a junior, two boys that are going to be a junior and a senior this year. And they said that they wanted to do games before we met on Wednesday nights. And I was like, great, you plan it, you run it, like that's your thing. And so like they have been strategizing and planning all summer on games and activities that we're going to do on Wednesdays before we start. Then we've had others that are just like, hey, I really feel like I'm supposed to teach. So is there any way that I could teach? There's other students that have just stepped up and served in other areas. It's been a really, really cool summer to see students step into leadership, step into just different opportunities where they feel God calling them. It's been a lot of fun. So ministry, that would probably be the thing. Man, as far as the negative side, I don't know if I want to. I mean, I'm gonna count it as my negative, I guess, because it was one of the more disappointing things over this summer. But I don't necessarily know if it was negative in the fact of like I'm sad that it happened. I think it might be a great direction change for us in the future, just kind of seeing where the kids are and what they're doing. We had to cancel our mission trip this summer because we had like 3 kids sign up. And the organization that we were going to go to was in a different state. And we just, as a staff, decided that it probably wouldn't be feasible to just travel with 3 kids. And so that was kind of disheartening. But at the same time, I think that's kind of pushing us into the mindset of the importance of local over going far away. And so I think that's a shift that we're going to be doing over the next couple of years is we're going to plan a lot of local stuff. And we've even talked about next year doing a mission week to where we serve with different people or different organizations in our community for an entire week, do one a day. And then kind of have like the mission trip feel, but they get to go home and sleep in their bed every night. And so
Yeah.
we're excited about that. Was kind of demoralizing, depressing at the time, but I think it's going to be beneficial in the long run as we move forward and keep adapting to how students are.
Man, I think that lends into what we're talking about today so well. So we're talking about essentially preparing for the next semester. In doing preparation, whether you're in the fall or the spring or somewhere in between. That actually rhymed. That was nice. There's always careful preparation and planning that goes into it, and some of that preparation comes to you plan and you get all the resources you need, and everything seems like it's going to be perfect, and then you get closer to the date and you have to cancel something, or something falls through, and it just like you said, it can be demoralizing. Sometimes we can feel a little embarrassed or like we failed. But I think the real failure in that is letting it keep you down, so to speak. If you stay there, then yeah, sure, it's a failure. But if you use it and you think about it, and you think about how you can maybe adapt or shift into something else, and still be able to serve, as you said, in a local scenario that could get more students involved. And it may have just been the timing. I mean, the one thing that I've noticed in the last few years, especially now that we've kind of gotten post-COVID, is that it seems like we're back to the pre-COVID like busyness of the summer. I think we talked about that in previous episodes, and it's kind of to a point where people are busier than ever. School started for a lot of people way sooner than it has. I know some people, in like South Texas, East Texas started on August 1st, like their actual first day of school. That's 2 to 3 weeks earlier than a lot of others. And so it just seems like summers are getting shorter and somehow busier. And so some of that is coming into adapting. So as we go into this topic,
Well, and if you don't mind me speaking in on that for just a second,
please, yeah.
I think somewhere along the line we have kind of consolidated this idea, or we've constructed this idea that like a schedule is concrete, and especially in ministry, I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think putting out a calendar is the plan of action, but we have to be adaptable and we have to move, not only in the way that our students are moving, but then also like we have to be kind of attentive to what the Spirit's going to do as well. And so like, yeah, you might have something planned, but like a fun game night or something after you get done with a Wednesday night service or a Sunday night service. But man, what happens when the Holy Spirit moves and worship extends for 30 minutes or an hour? So I think we need to kind of untie ourselves from the business mindset of a calendar to where like everything is structured. We have to attend these things and they have to do all these things. And we also need to understand that like Jerry Varner said this in one of the episodes that I had with him. And he said, give me your calendar and I can tell you your priorities. And he was like, so basically he was like, your calendar should not only be a map, but it's also a mirror. And so like you're planning and directing where you're supposed to be going and doing all those different things, but also like it's mirroring your intentions and it's mirroring what you're actually focusing on. And if you're driving through this calendar just because you put it out there and like that's what's going to happen because you've already made it that way, you might be missing the mark. And I'm not saying like drop events just for the sake of feeling like you drop events and stuff like that, but be open to the mindset that sometimes change is inevitable and change is necessary, and be willing to ask the question of like, oh man, that didn't really seem like that worked. How can we make that work next year? Or that didn't seem like it worked. Was that a valuable piece of our time? And I think those are two real big things when you look into that. And I think we'll kind of talk about this a little more as we get going. But just the mindset of like, this idea that like calendars aren't flexible has to stop.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're 100% right. We can get so tied to our calendars, and they're helpful, but at the end of the day, it's a tool. It's a resource that helps us get where we want to go. Man, so we talked a little bit about the summer, and part of the reason why I asked that question is kind of teeing up our first question here, and that is our follow-up strategy. For most of us, the summer can be easily in youth ministry the busiest time of the year for us. It's what I always call it's go time. And so even if you're in a ministry that maybe doesn't meet every single week, camps and mission trips and all the other things, summers can get away from you very, very quickly. And so I guess my first question for you is this is, with all the things that have happened this summer, you named off a lot of really good things that you've done with your ministry. What is your strategy for following up and making sure that goes into your fall planning?
So as far as that goes, I think following up is a definite priority. For me, it starts in the summer. Like I'm doing it all summer long, but then I'm kind of pushing more and more and more and pressing more and more into it. In the fact, as we approach the fall, for instance, one of the things that I feel like I'm supposed to do this year, that I've told a couple people, is I really feel like with the high school in our student ministry, I feel like I'm supposed to co-teach every single series that we do this year. And so that means that every single time I start a new series, I have a student in mind to help me either come up with that series or help me teach that series. And so we're going to be doing that over and over and over again. And part of that has been follow-up throughout the summer. The other thing is we had kids go to camp that have had calls to ministry, where they feel like they have a desire to step into professional ministry. We have had people that have desire to get baptized. We have people that honestly are just dealing with stuff. And maybe that stuff came to light at camp for the first time because they're trying to let it go. It's just this mindset of when you follow up, you're A, showing that they're still relevant and you still care about their problem. B, showing that you remembered about their problem. And then C, you're still trying to help with that mindset. Like you still want to see them get to that end point. And so one of the things that I did with my high school this summer, because I primarily do high school, I have an associate youth pastor that primarily handles junior high, other than doing trips and camps and stuff like that. But as far as teaching and curriculum wise, I handle high school, she handles junior high. And one of the things I did this summer is I told all my high schoolers, I was like, hey, I want to meet with you over this summer. I want to just basically take you to coffee. I want to take you to breakfast. I want to take you to lunch. It's on me. All you have to do is tell me when, where, and show up. And so we did that. I got to meet with 7 or 8 different students over the course of the summer, and just ask them realistic life questions of like, hey, what's your stress level right now? And it was quite alarming to see that like out of those 8 kids, probably 2 of them still in the middle of summer said their stress level was at like a 7. And so like trying to work and walk through that with them, it's just constant follow-up. A lot of people can kind of drop what they're doing over the summer because it gets hectic, like you said, but like that's in all reality, that's when students have time to talk. That's when students have time to go and listen and visit and be a part of things. And so if you're not utilizing that time as a follow-up method too, you're missing out on some really, really valuable stuff. But as we push into the fall, I talked about all those kids that want to get baptized, or the kids that have the call to ministry, or the kids that want to help teach, or everything like that. Now is the time where I'm saying, all right, hey, you've said you want to do this. Now let's get it done. And so I'm doing my best efforts to push them into whatever they had said that they were going to do. Because I think all of us have at one point in time said something, oh, hey, I'm going to go do this. And then you never do it. And so a lot of times, especially with teenagers, like they have all the ambition in the world to get that change done. But as soon as they get back into the real world, they forget about it because they have 125 other things going on in their brain. And so following up with them is also just pushing and pursuing their hearts and what they want. And you also get to hear more of their heart and their story in the process, which is really, really important. So following up is, as far as the fall, I have followed up to continue communication and connection all summer. As I shift into the fall, what I'm doing is now it's where the rubber meets the road. You said you wanted to do this, so let's get it done. Whether that be, hey, I want to be on the worship team, or hey, I want to speak in youth, or hey, I would love to help you write a lesson, or whatever. All of those different things are very, very important. But sometimes they just need the little extra love push or love kick or love shove in order to make those things happen. And so that's kind of where my follow-up shifts for the fall, is just this mindset of let's get things done.
For sure. I think that's incredible, man. And one of the things that you had mentioned that really stuck out to me is how many of our students whose stress level stays high, even in the times that are supposed to be meant for rest. The summer, or at least I feel like it was originally designed for rest, and now it just feels like an opportunity to join more travel teams and keep everything going. And it's like there's not really an off season anymore. That makes it really, really difficult. And so maybe some of the follow up there too is not even just following up on the incredible things that God is doing in their lives. Sometimes it's just, hey, how's your heart today? Like, are you doing okay? Is your mind okay? Are you doing okay mentally? Are you doing okay physically? Like, do you need to talk? Do you want to go grab some coffee, or whatever their drink of choice is? That kind of thing, and go take them out and just make sure that they're doing okay, because especially if you're not meeting in the summer, there are so many students that really do depend on the relationship they have with us and our volunteer leaders. And I would also encourage your leaders, your adult leaders, other people at the church, especially if you know that a couple of students have a really good connection with them, follow up with them and make sure that they're following up, that kind of thing. And so I think follow-up can go so many different directions. And obviously we're talking about summer to fall because that's the season we're currently in as we record this episode, but these things are timeless. These are things that whether you're in the summer, the fall, the winter, the spring, anytime, these things are important to continue to keep at the forefront of your conversations and your planning.
And the last question that I asked in all those lunches or coffees or breakfasts or whatever they were was, set two goals for yourself this year. And what is a goal that you would like to accomplish personally? And what is a goal? And I specifically did this. I actually strayed away from the faith goals because that was a lot of the conversation we had before this. But I found out that a lot of the faith elements came out in their personal goal, and then their family goal. I said, what is one goal that you have for your family this year? And basically, how can you be more involved with your family, or how can you do better as a member of your family? Like, what is one thing you can do that you can be a better member of your family for, as far as a goal? And so those two, a lot of them were still very, very much faith involved. Some of them, one of them literally just said, I should probably talk to my parents. And that was his goal for the year.
Fair
I was
point.
like, well, that's fine. I was like, that's a great goal. But what does that mean? When you say talk to your parents, are you going to start saying hi to your mom as you pass her going to your room? Or do you actually want to have conversations? And so just having those moments of where you can check in spiritually, mentally, emotionally, but then also just having those moments where they can kind of see, hey, what do I want to do with this year, kind of thing. So.
For sure, man. I think those are really, if you're not doing that, you need to be. We'll leave it at that. If you need help with some good follow-up questions and stuff, please reach out to us. Send us an email, shoot us a message on any of our social media stuff. We would love to brainstorm some ways to help you specifically in your scenario. All right, let's move on to the next one. So, talking about fall planning, our preparation, What does that look like for you in your scope of ministry? Obviously, a lot of your planning for the fall has already happened. But what are some other things that you do? Could you just kind of walk us through
Yeah. Yeah.
your prep?
So as far as my fall is planned, I will go ahead and say my fall is not completely planned. And I think part of that has been um, intentional this year. We're kind of trying to see the generalized feel of this group before we jump into more. Because a lot of things that we had been doing for a long time really fell flat this past year. And so it was kind of time to hit the question of like, okay, is it really this, or like, is it just time to put this away? Um, and so I know exactly where we're going curriculum wise. And that is like, that is an absolute must in my mind. I typically know by the end of June where I'm going to go through December, because scope and sequence is the most important thing when it comes to our job. What we're teaching and the direction and path that we're teaching them through. And so having those different opportunities is important. Then also, like, once again, kind of going back to that flexibility strain, it's like flexibility conversation of sometimes um, I plan a series for 3 weeks and it extends into 6 weeks. And I have to be able to say, okay, wait, no, we're just going to move this series and put this series over here and take this series over here. So I have a generalized plan where I am going, but it doesn't mean that it always ends up going that route. The things that we don't have planned this semester so far, or this upcoming semester, are our activities. Honestly, that's been one of the things we've struggled with over the past years. Our kids really, really are into the lessons. They're really, really into worship, but our games, or like our fun nights, have flopped. And so for me, I'm like, great, let's get rid of events. I don't really care. But I understand that kids like to have fun, and it's a great opportunity for them to bring people. And so I get that 100%. And so it has become an evaluation process for us, especially over this past month or so, where it's like, hey, okay, like we really pretty much every single fall we do like 4 or 5 staple events. Where we do the same things because they're a lot of fun. We had, like I said, we had a couple of them fall flat this year. And so now it's like, okay, what did that fall flat because we just tried to do it at the high school? Or did that fall flat because they just really didn't like that? Or was it on a bad weekend? Like, so we're trying to go through all the evaluation and planning processes of that. Because most of the time, the stuff that we do is fairly well received. Like I said, but this last year, it kind of threw us for a loop, and we've really kind of went back to the drawing board in a lot of different aspects for that. But as far as like volunteers, quite honestly, my volunteers were solidified before we got out of last semester. I knew who was coming back, so I had time to fill if I needed to. Thankfully, this year we have nobody leaving, which is a blessing. They all came back. And so that is a phenomenal blessing to walk into this semester with, because I know where everybody is. I know what they're doing. And I know the value behind all of them. I do know that we had a college kid playing acoustic guitar in the praise team last year. He told me at the beginning of June he's bowing out. So I have been spending the summer trying to find a replacement. So I don't have to be up there on stage every Wednesday. And so just it's a lot more of the logistical side of things, of just like making sure all of our ducks are in a row as far as um, admin, and making sure that the events are actually run in ways that are beneficial not only to us, but then they also kind of go through the framework of everything else that we're doing. And so it's not necessarily curriculum planning. It's much more of like, hey, here's like, if we go and do like a bird's eye view, like what is kind of sinking in the sand and what's not. And so that's kind of our evaluation for the fall. And spring changes a little bit, but that's pretty much the evaluation, because all the important stuff we've already covered, and we are already well planned and prepared to go ahead and already tackle.
Yeah, I mean, and as you said, like having your volunteers all rolling over from one semester to the next, that is a massive, massive blessing. So I'm, super stoked for you. And I was even, as Brent had mentioned earlier, we do direct a camp together, and so one of our newer college leaders who had helped sing with his worship team, and she stepped up and did so many cool small group stuff. She is so solid, and basically her stepping into that acoustic role that you're needing is massive. And so
She hasn't officially told
have,
me yes yet, but I've already put her down for Wednesday night that we start.
for what it's worth, she actually did tell you yes at camp. I'll back you up on that.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go. I will just pull up this episode when it comes out and be like, hey, watch this section. David said.
No, because she was playing when we were. It was after we had practiced and we were kind of playing around, and she every single time we'd finished, she picked up the guitar and was playing. And as she was playing, she played one of her songs for us, and she did a really, really great job. And of course, we were just lavishing praise because the song was incredible, and her ability, her finger picking, her rhythm technique, like she was killing it. And it was one of those things where you had mentioned, okay, yeah, so you're gonna play guitar, and she was like, I don't know, and then I stepped in and was like, no, seriously, you're very, very good, you're very gifted, and I think it would be a huge blessing to those students to see not only somebody playing guitar, but in a world that is screaming for representation, to have such a solid female college leader teaching them how to do the thing, like that's an incredible blessing. And so she was kind of like, okay, yeah, that's true.
Well, and dude, it hasn't been our like plan, but like our praise team in high school is all female, like, which is awesome.
Yeah, and they're all solid, like so. But part of that came to preparing the way for that. I mean, that was something that you set as a vision for your youth ministry, as well as eventually our mid-high camp. We were talking about that back in 2018, 2019. And now you've got a team that's so solid that they could actually go out and lead worship. So it's a really incredible thing. And all of that comes down to preparing and making sure that you have the right people in the right places, and that they're trained well, and that you're giving them the resources that they need to succeed and to fail too, because that's part of it, right?
Yeah.
So let's move into our next one. And I think this one is super, super important. And I know this is something you're really passionate about. So I wanted to add it. We kind of, I don't know if we said it in the podcast, but we kind of put together sort of a top 5 list of just things that were on our heart and mind when it comes to prepping for a semester. Like what are things that are just vital to making sure that we're well prepared going into it. But it's meeting with your volunteers. And so would you walk us through?
So as far as that goes, just the mindset of, if you have volunteers, you should talk to them. That's a great thing. But I think I kind of tongue-in-cheek joke about that, because I was telling David before we started, I said, I remember many a semester in my younger youth ministry days where I didn't say a word. I just literally knew they were, like, I checked to make sure they were going to be there. And then, like, when they walked in the door on that first Wednesday night, I was like, hey, here's the curriculum you're going to teach tonight. Thanks for being here. And so that, I mean, I guess in larger context that might work. But in most youth ministries, I think they need more information than that. And so nowadays, like, I take all my volunteers out to lunch. And we literally just have like a planning meeting to where we talk through different different things we're going to be teaching through, the curriculums that they're going to be using, how the volunteer breakdown is going to be, who's where, who's going to be doing what. And so there's a lot of value and importance with that. And then the other thing behind it is also, like, I want to show and instill the fact that I trust all of the volunteers that are up there. Otherwise they wouldn't be up there. And trust so much so that, like, the way that we break down our stuff is we have 6th graders that meet by themselves, 7th and 8th grade meet together, and then high school meets together. And so 6th grade is just a pure foundational year. They talk through every single foundational element of Christianity. And then they go into a little later in the year going into, like, how do you read your Bible? How do you pray? stuff like that. And so it is a very, very foundational year, but it's also building that framework to where we have the ground level now. And then they go into seventh and eighth grade, which is taught by my associate youth pastor, Shauna. And she spends a year in the Old Testament and a year in the New Testament. And so by the time that they end eighth grade, they've done a year in the Old and a year in the New. And then they come to high school, and we talk about a ton of different things. But we always start the year with different ideas when it comes to basically the four big questions of life: purpose, origin, meaning, and destiny. No, origin, meaning, morality, and destiny, I think. And so basically what am I here for? Why am I here? What was I made for? And is there something after this? And so we kind of address all of those one every semester to start the school year. And then we go into some of the more tangible or mostly less tangible aspects of faith of what do we do when we're talking about having our faith in high school? What do we do about talking about praise actually being a weapon? And what do we do about when we have friends that aren't necessarily agreeing or holding to the biblical truths that we want to hold to? What about sex and relationships and all those things? So we jump into all the different areas as far as that goes. But sixth grade, going back to that foundational, we don't have a staff member teach that. We have a volunteer family that teaches that entire sixth grade year. And I set them up with curriculum a while ago, and they have just taken it and run with it and adapted it and modded it and done all kinds of different things. They've added series that they go through at the end because the curriculum isn't quite long enough to do the full year. And so they absolutely kill it. And they do a great job. And it's because I 100% give them the reins. I trust them being up there. I trust what they're talking about with our students. And it's really, really cool. Then the other side of it, it's just are you communicating to volunteers that are teaching? Are you communicating to volunteers that are just filling a role of being that extra person in the room? If so, give them a responsibility other than just sitting there on the couch. Maybe they can help with check-in. Maybe you can just say, hey, man, you're going to be my greeter. I want you to make sure every student gets said hello to before worship starts. Or, hey, we have this drink fridge. Make sure that the kids don't go crazy on the caffeinated beverages. Let's limit them, but also strike up a conversation with them as they go. Or, hey, you're my games guy. We have a ping pong table and a pool table in our youth room. I want to see you playing one of those with students every single time we come in the room. Just this mindset of having them, giving them something to buy into, because if they don't have anything to buy into and they're just the warm body, that warm body ain't staying long. So know when you're speaking to volunteers who you're speaking to, because that conversation might look different depending on the volunteer that you are talking to. But then also make sure you cherish their time. It does not take much money to buy them lunch. We do a lunch for all of our volunteers at the beginning of the year. I typically take them out to eat barbecue. And it might cost me $120, $130 to feed my whole team. But they really, really enjoy it. They love sitting down. When it comes to Christmas, we have gifts for all of them. We are intentional with our gifts. We don't say, hey, here's the same $50 gift card that all y'all get. We specifically go into thinking about what their family would most benefit from, and give them things that happen. For instance, that sixth grade family that is just now going for Christmas gifts, part of that communication and that connection of knowing your volunteers. They had a girl graduate this year. It was their only daughter. And so for Christmas, we gave them a bunch of opportunities to go do stuff as family. And it didn't take anything extra on our part other than maybe making one or two extra stops. For the college kids in our youth ministry, we got them huge food gift cards, just because college kids want food. And cafeterias 9 times out of 10 are pretty awful. And so it's just knowing your volunteers, but part of that is going and meeting with your volunteers regularly, communicating with them, but you have to know why they're there. you have to know what they're doing, and then you have to love on them while they're in the process of serving those students and make sure they're actually getting something out of it. Otherwise, you're not going to have a volunteer base very long.
For sure. Man, if you're not taking notes, take note. There were some really, really good, important things there.
And none of it was my original idea, I promise. I've taken ideas from everybody under the sun when it comes to volunteers.
Oh, for sure. We're actually going to get back to that in just a little bit. I've got an honorable mention section that we're going to hit some of those things. But let's move into the next one. I think this one's a really, really important one. And whether you're brand new to your ministry, like, for instance, I was in a church for 10 years and now I'm just starting and this is my first fall. And so a lot of the things that I'm doing at this point is really just getting out in the community, trying to build relationships, let people know who I am and what I'm about, networking with other youth pastors in my area. And all of that's super important. Let's get in the schools. Let's start building those relationships.
Yeah.
So what does that look like for you in your context? You've obviously been in your church for a long time, and I think sometimes it's easy you've kind of built those relationships. Is it still important to get out in your community?
Yeah, so I'm in my 8th year at Wylie. I think most people have probably said that in other podcast episodes. In my 14th year total. And one of the things with it is just this mindset of like, your community will always need to know what's going on. Your community will always be a huge resource if you tap into it. And the more that you have opportunities to get involved in your community, the better. And community is a very broad word. I break down community into like 3 different groups that I really, really try to go after. First off, like, obviously, I mean, this is a given. Go after your school or schools, depending on where you're from. First and foremost, try to find ways where you can be a blessing. Try to find ways where you can benefit. Do the things that you really don't want to do, but they asked you to do, or they asked if you want to help. Because those are the things that are really, really important and impactful. And those are going to give you opportunities to get your foot in the door. If you don't know, or if you don't have a good access point to get into schools, especially if you're in pretty much most of the continental United States, you probably have some kind of campus connection ministry, whether it be FCA or First Priority or one of the other ones. Jump in with them, because more than likely they probably already have a foot in the door, and maybe you can get up there and maybe you can lead an FCA talk, and that's a great one to start with. The other thing is just like understanding, like, going into where your church is. Start with the body that you have. How many of your people in your church are teaching at the schools that you're in? And be like, hey, so like, I really want to come and bring our youth kids pizza for whatever. Is that a possibility? Or like, I mean, what else could I do? What are some creative? Then you're pulling them in and trying to get them invested and involved on an activity or a focus. And then also just other opportunities to just maybe even schedule a meeting and sit down with the principal of one of the schools and be like, hey, I want to be a blessing to you. I want to just serve you and your staff as much as I can, because y'all are on the front lines more than I am. And you are dealing with students every single day, and you are speaking life into these students more than I am. So how can I be a ministry? How can I be a benefit to you? And that's probably something you can get your entire church behind. The other thing that I would say with schools also is a lot of times they have different organizations or programs. There's, at least in Texas, there's one thing kind of popping up in schools. It's smaller right now, but I think it's going to kind of grow and become a thing in quite a few schools. But it's called Mentors Care, and it's basically just like where people from the community can come in and do one-on-one meetings with students, basically. And like they have a guy that runs it, sets it all up, and like organizes what community member is with what kid and all this stuff. And it's very, very well run. Like I said, it's only in a handful of schools right now in Texas, but I could see it going big pretty quickly. And it's just this mindset of like any way that you can get your foot in the door, any way that you can be a part, whether you can bring teachers coffee on the first day of school, or whether you can volunteer to pray, like just show up, or maybe call the principal one day and be like, hey, can I pray for you? Like you're about to walk into the juggernaut, like of all things, like high school emotions after the summer, not a lot of fun. Can I commit to covering you in prayer? Or hey, do you have any prayer requests that I can specifically go after? One of the things that I do every single year that I'm like, it's not my favorite thing that I do, but I sign up every single year because I know that like it's a blessing to the community, is the fact that a lot of our community does a prayer hop between all of the schools in our district. And they call me every year to be at one of the schools at a random time on Saturday morning and lead the prayer for all the parents that show up there to pray. And I do it every single time because it's something that takes maybe 20, 30 minutes of my time on a Saturday, but it's something that has community involvement and impact for all of the parents and people that are going to those schools. And you're also getting a firsthand opportunity to pray for the schools with other people, which is a great thing. So schools is part one of the community. I'd say number two in the community would be probably the businesses and corporations in your community. Get to know who is a big time community aspect member when it comes to stuff. A lot of times there's restaurants that are like real big in the community that you can maybe step in and serve with them as they go. There's a couple restaurants in Abilene that do they like feed homeless and stuff like that, and like you can show up and help them feed, and like they'll donate food for different like nonprofits and stuff like that. And so like finding those people that have a heart to serve is really, really important. But then also like getting to know your community when you have a need and you need to go ask them, they're a lot more like open to saying, yeah, hey, like sure, like let's make this happen. There's a barbecue place in Abilene called The Shed, which is fantastic. It's one of my favorite places in town. But like the owners are fantastic people, genuinely people after God's heart, like in everything they do. And we did we do one fundraiser a year, and I went to them last year. And for the previous years before that, I had just asked them, I'm like, hey, would you be willing to like, do like a gift card to y'all for whatever. First time I went in to ask for a gift card, they pulled out a basket. They stuck a $50 gift card in it. They put a hat, 2 shirts, all of the seasonings that they were selling, and then like their barbecue sauces, and like made a gift basket out of it. And I asked for like a $25 gift card. And so like they have a heart for serving the community. They have a heart for serving people in churches. And then this year I was like, hey, we're going to change it up this year. Instead, we want to buy food from you guys. And so like they were like, okay, that's fine. We're going to discount everything for y'all. They were like, typically, like we're gonna like let you have our chicken and sausage for 50% off. We're gonna let you have our brisket for like 30% off, and all this stuff. And then they cooked it all for me. They had it hot, ready, prepared after they closed. Like they had people wait for me, so like it could still be in the warmers. So it'd be nice and hot and ready for me to pick it up right before our event. Like people like that are awesome, but like you have to get out into the community to know those people before those people can be a resource, and can be an opportunity for you to do things with your church or other nonprofit organizations. And then the other thing is like jumping out into those organizations and businesses in the community is like you got to know where to take your kids that are like opportunities for them to serve too. So you need to be aware of the food banks, the soup kitchens, the clothes closets, all those different things. If you don't know where they are, you're never going to take kids to go do them. So you need to be aware of all those different things. And one of the best things we can do for preteens and teenagers is give them short-term operations to serve other people. Because that's when they learn how to take their gaze off of themselves and put it on other people. And ultimately, that's one of the best growth tools that we have. Finally, the last thing is, with that is I don't know if I love the terminology of this, but I call it my inner circle. And it's like the people that are in my neighborhood or the people that are in my kids' classes, like the parents and the families, they're like my kids' friends' families, like all those, like the inner circle families in your community, to where like you have better access to them through the connections that you have. Like, man, show them Jesus, love on them. Like that is your biggest and best opportunity. And then the thing is a lot of times, like the number of times that I've gone in and like spoken to someone or had a conversation and they're like, hey, like we don't have a church. I'm like, well, that's awesome. Y'all should come with us. And then they start coming to our church too, just because we were friendly and invited them over for dinner. Or maybe they needed a babysitter so they could go have a night out. That's like, that's great. Bring the kids over. Like, we're going to be here anyways. Like, we'll have food for them. Y'all just go out and have fun, kind of thing like that. And yeah, it's a great opportunity to be the hands and feet of Jesus to the people in your inner circle. And sometimes the people that are just as frazzled and stressed out as all the other parents and all the other things going on in the world, you get to kind of be that light and that beacon of hope.
That's huge, man. That's so important and vital. And like, I think sometimes we forget about that. Like, especially because they're our inner circle, I think sometimes we're a little afraid to ask the questions. Like, we don't want to make it seem like we're using our friendship to, gain more members to our church or whatever. But, I mean, sometimes it really is just as simple as, I started coming to church because you invited me.
Heck yeah, dude.
Like, I think we forget that we have a vital role in that. We're always trying to equip the next generation to always make sure that they're inviting, but we can invite too.
Yeah.
And we have friends too, and so sometimes we need to take our own advice, right?
Yeah.
So this leads into our next thing. And so kind of alluded to this earlier. But summers are busy. They're so stinking busy. For us, we made the move right after graduation, came right in and hit the ground running, and had very little time to try to build a few relationships and get to know people before we loaded up and went to camp for pretty much a month. And so with everything going on in July, I didn't have a single week open in July. And so this was actually my first week to sit down and actually kind of wrap my head around, okay, I know what I want to do, but now that I've gotten to build some relationships and ask some questions, what of this planning is applicable to this new season that I'm in, and what isn't, and what are some things that they really have enjoyed in the past and things that they didn't enjoy, and but in all of that, don't know about you. Well, okay, I do know because you did say you got to take some vacations, which is awesome. So whether you got to take some time to rest with your family, and I love what you said about going and doing experiences. That's kind of for my wife and I, a lot of our gifts come in the form of what kind of experience can we give you? And maybe that's as simple as, we're going to take your kids, we're going to feed your kids, and you guys can get away for the day or the weekend or whatever, but being able to give them that. But it's so important that we take the time to rest, to take a Sabbath, something that I am previously have been terrible at. I'm getting better, though I didn't get to take vacation this summer, which is okay. Part of that just came into, as I said earlier, my wife started school earlier than she would have. She's already started, and her old school has not. So it's one of those things where it's like, oh, well, time kind of got away from us. And that can happen so easily. And so so I wanted to go ahead and throw this out there. If you had a busy summer, you need to find some time.
Yeah.
This fall. You have to refresh if you're going to have the energy. For me, I have learned that the fall can be one of the busiest times because there's so many new things that are happening, at least in Texas.
Yeah.
Can we just say football season? That encompasses a lot of ministry with our students. But if you have had the time to take some rest, go take some more. And so what are your thoughts on Sabbath and rest?
So I'm just going to go out and say West Texas Cardinal sin. I didn't go to a single football game last fall.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and I loved it because I don't really care about it. I didn't have any youth kids playing in it, so I didn't go. And quite honestly, if I had youth kids playing in it, I would have gone to a game or two and left it at that. I'm a big proponent of I'm not idolizing any sport over the other. I'm not idolizing any student's time over the other. My goal is to hit a event per area just so I can see the kids that are involved, unless a kid specifically asks me to try and make it. And that typically, ironically, only happens with drama and theater. I get asked to go watch plays more than anything else, which most of the time I love.
Same.
I take my wife with me, and we kind of treat it as a date night or a date afternoon.
Yeah.
And so that's a cool opportunity. But as far as that comes, I think a lot of your opportunities for rest and relaxation really, really depend on the health of your church, really depend on the functionality of your church, and the how to put this, the flexibility of your boss, aka the senior pastor. So I am at a unicorn. I'm going to be honest, like as soon as summer hit, I haven't spent more than half a day in the office all summer. Because I don't. My pastor doesn't care. I'm just like, dude, look, I'm going to utilize my time, and sitting up here on my computer twiddling my thumbs is not utilizing my time. I don't have anything to do for the latter half of the afternoon, so I'm going to go home. My wife and my kids are both home. I'm going to do as much family as I can over the summer, and he doesn't care at all. And so with that being said, my hours on over the summer, most of the time, granted, I mean, like if there's something going on, of course I stay, and there's some times where stuff comes up on Saturdays, or I'm gone for a week, or just like every other youth pastor. But like for the weeks of the summer that we have nothing going on, there's days that I come into the office at 9 o'clock in the morning and I leave by 12. There's days that I come into the office at 10 and I leave by 12. I get my stuff done, and my pastor is not a micromanager. He's not watching me clock hours or anything like that. And honestly, I think that allows me to thrive even more, because I think it depends on you as a person too. If you are one that can just go in and get your stuff done and then leave, I think working in an environment like that can really, really be beneficial. But I also know people that cannot work in an environment like that at all, and they have to be told what to do, and they have to be kind of guided and directed, and kind of have to have the plan made for them. And that could be really, really chaotic and devastating to you as a pastor. So like, be mindful of who you are, be mindful of your church. It doesn't work in all scenarios, but like if your pastor seems to be potentially open, man, put that on the docket for next summer and be like, hey, look, especially like my wife's a teacher. And so like she has the summer off. And so the last thing I want to do is go sit up in the office when all of them are home. And so I just kind of had that conversation with him, and I was like, look, dude, I like, if you need me here, I'll be here. Like, I'm home with my kids right now because my wife is like in service, like getting ready for the school year to start. I had to go up to the church twice today, because they decided that they were going to pressure wash and bleach all of the tables in our fellowship hall. So I showed up at 7:30 this morning with both of my boys. We helped them get all the tables out to the parking lot. We came back, and at 1 o'clock-ish, I drove back up there and I helped them put all the tables back in. Not a big deal, but I didn't have to sit in between that for 5 hours twiddling my thumbs doing nothing. I know what I need to get done before I go into the office. That way I'm efficient and I have time to get it done. And I think there's a lot of speaking, I think there's a lot of health when it comes to that. So that is where my rest and relaxation comes from the most. Is just this mindset of I don't overwork myself over the summer. I know that I'm going to be gone over certain situations, and there's going to be weeks that I have to pull double time or triple time. And that's totally fine. But for the weeks that I'm not, I'm going to guard my time, and I'm going to spend as much time with family as I can. It makes it miserable when I get to spend all week with my family. And then they all go back to school, and I'm by myself from 8 to 3. Or 8 to 3:30, because it's hard to transition back into that. But like just the mindset of like, I prioritize the time that I have, and sitting in the office doing nothing is not what I'm going to do. And so if that's you and you're like, man, I wish I could do that, have the conversation with your pastor. Maybe he's not like, hey, yeah, that's fine, you can come in the mornings, but maybe you could be like, hey, can I like work a day less over the summer? It's just so I have another day home with my wife or my kids. And like, who knows? Like, if you never ask, you'll never know. So that's where I get most of my rest, other than vacations. We did more vacations than I preferably would have wanted to this summer, because I'm not a like go out and travel. I'd rather stay home. Yeah, so like rest and relaxation came in a lot of different ways, but that is the one that I primarily set for myself, is just the mindset that I'm going to be home as much as I can.
It's huge. We forget sometimes how much we sacrifice our families in pursuit of ministry, and it's all good stuff. And my wife, I mean, just like your wife, she loves to serve and help out wherever she can. My son, same thing. He loves to serve and help out where he can. But some days, just as a little bit of a gut check for you, if you're like me and you naturally overwork, I listen to my family. I've been very clear with my family. Hey, if I'm overdoing it, communicate with me.
Yeah.
And so the beautiful thing is my son didn't need that. He naturally is very good at saying, Daddy, no, I need you home. And he's 7 years old, and he can articulate like, nope, I need you. And that's it. My son needs me, and I'm gonna, if I can't get out of something today, I'm gonna find time tomorrow, and we're gonna make sure we safeguard that, because when the people you love tell you you're overdoing it, just believe them.
Yeah.
Whether you agree or not.
When I was in a...
because maybe they just need you.
Yeah. I sat in a seminar early on in youth ministry, and I basically listened to someone say, you never want to hear from your spouse. And this is kind of talking more towards the married youth pastors that listen to this podcast. But you never want to hear your spouse say, I wish I was the church.
Whew.
And that was one of those things that like that stuck with me. It absolutely rattled me to the core when I heard it, and I was like, I will never be that person. And so there are times where I have to get stuff done, but I do everything in my power to be home as much as I can, because I'm not going to be the one that places ministry over my family, because my family is my first ministry.
Yeah, that's it.
So
have those conversations with your church. If your church is not about that, then I think you need to have some deeper conversations with, and I'm not saying just go leave your church. I just mean
I
fight
quit.
For it. Have those conversations, be intentional.
I listened to a podcast and David told me.
I was literally about to say, send your pastor my way. I'd be happy to have a phone call with your pastor. You think I'm joking. I've had these conversations with pastors, and helping them understand that, because, and I've done an episode on it called Bridging the Gap Between Student Ministry and student pastors and pastors, like lead pastors.
Yeah.
Because of the simple fact that sometimes we serve senior pastors who've never done any other ministry other than leading the full church. And truth be told, when you are an umbrella pastor like that over so many ministries, it can be so easy to forget the nuances inside of that, because you zoom out, you preach, and sometimes there's, you're not necessarily in the trenches as much. And that's not every senior pastor. I'm very much generalizing. I'm not saying anything against the senior pastor by any means, but I think some never actually experience that, and so they don't necessarily know how to help you in your area, and then other situations where maybe they've been out of the youth ministry game for long enough that they've forgotten how taxing youth ministry can be. They forget how hard it is to recover from a week of camp. and then to turn around and do it again a week later or 2 weeks later. And, you know, Brent and I like to joke, especially around our camp, we're starting to become the older ones there.
Yep.
And we're only 34.
Yep.
So, like, we're not old by any means. But I'll tell you, man, recovering from high school camp this year, after a move and everything else like that, I still don't think I've fully recovered.
Oh, see, you're old. I'm fine. I was fine like a day later. I'm good.
Yeah, but you didn't go through a move.
I didn't go through a move.
So,
I don't know what you're whining about. Jeez.
And you got vacation, just saying.
Yeah.
But I seriously, I joke. It's one of those things where, like I said, have those conversations with your senior pastor. It's healthy.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing. I know it can be scary, especially if you don't have an amazing relationship with your senior pastor. But I think it's vital to have those conversations. And if you can't be honest with where you are, then some harder conversations need to happen.
Yeah.
And so.
Yep.
Go get rest. It's important.
It is.
Coming from the poster child of not getting rest, it will catch up to you. So, do better. Learn from my mistakes, please. I'm not the authority to be telling you this, but Britt is.
I am. Rest.
So that's why I'm the host and he's the guest. So go rest. Awesome. There's a lot more we could talk about today, but we are just about at the hour mark, so I think I'm going to put a tab in it there, and we'll probably write down some of those. I had some honorable mention stuff, but I would like to try to engage with you guys as you're listening. If you've listened this far, thank you so much for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You know, what would be your top 5 things that you do to prepare for the next semester, the next season of ministry? Let us know those things. Like, shoot us a comment. This is kind of a note to Brent. Maybe we can put together a social media post, and we can actually, tag this episode and say, hey, here's our top 5. What's your top 5? And let's engage in the conversation. But please, please, please reach out to us and let us know. We'd love to know. And maybe there's things that we didn't even consider that Brent and I might have to get back on and do another episode on.
Always.
A whole other 5, and we'll bring you in on the conversation
yeah.
if you'd like to be part of that, man. But that's the big thing about student ministry conversations. We say it all the time because it's important. This is not just a tagline or a catchphrase for us. This ministry does not happen. This podcast does not happen unless you guys are in on the conversation with us. So please, please, please reach out to us. And again, thank you so much for listening. We'd be so honored if you would share our podcast, maybe this episode or other episodes that you loved with your youth pastor friends, or sometimes even your children's minister needs to hear these things, right? Or your senior pastor, as we were just saying. Share this episode. Let us have the hard conversation, but tag it on social media using @TalkStudentMen. Finally, if you would like to be on the show in the future, like I just said, please reach out to us on social media, or you can send us an email at podcast@studentministryconversations.org. We'd love to set up a time for you to join us. Until then, Brent, it's been fun. Great conversation. I love these sort of in-house things that we get to do every once in a while.
Yep.
Always fun. And we typically start with 1 or 2 things. We have no idea if we're going to go long, and this was probably one of our longer ones.
I was going to say, it always tends to go longer than expected, but this was a good conversation.
Yeah, for sure. But thank you so much for your time, man. We will see you guys. Have a great week, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. And make sure to let us know what your top 5 is.
Yes, from the person that edits and puts on the podcast episodes week to week. We have put out 100, and I think this is 166 episodes. And we have over 10,000 views on our podcast. And we have never, well,
really,
actually, I say never. We've had a handful of people email us and tell us that they liked an episode. So like, if you're listening genuinely, like, please reach out. Like, we love to hear from you guys. If you think that our podcast is awful and we need to go in a new direction, we still want to hear from you, because we value your opinion, and we love any constructive feedback that you guys have, whether it's you guys killed it, thanks for doing it, or hey, you guys really need to get better. We're all for it. So we just want to hear from you guys. So
for sure. Y'all have a great week, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.